Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Terp Family Fundamentals webinar series. My name is Danielle Walker. I'm the Assistant Director in the Office of Family Engagement. For those of you that are new, this webinar series is intended to help you become informed partners on campus resources so that you can better support your Terps. Today, I'm joined by staff in the Office of Off-Campus Housing Services. They're going to be discussing the off-campus housing search, the resources that are in place for your students who may be looking to move off campus or live off campus, and also how you can support your Terp as they navigate that process. If you have any questions, please feel free to submit those via the Q&A feature. To access the Q&A feature, you'll find the two conversation bubbles on your Zoom toolbar. If you don't see the Q&A or the two chat bubbles, you may need to expand your toolbar, and you should see it there. To help us answer questions that the majority of you have, I ask that you use the upvote option. So within the Q&A feature, if you see a question that you also would like the answer to, instead of typing the same question, just select the thumbs up icon. This is an upvote, and we'll be prioritizing the questions with the most upvotes. And also be sure to look at the answered tab as well, because once we respond to a question, it'll move over to that answered tab. We'll do our best to answer as many questions as we can before the end of the webinar. And then lastly, this webinar is being recorded and it'll be available on our Terp Family YouTube channel this afternoon. So refer to your confirmation or reminder email for the link to our YouTube channel. And so with that, I will hand it over to Jenny.
All right, thanks so much, Danielle. Hi, folks. My name is Jennifer Lindstrom. I'm the manager for housing partnerships and off-campus housing services in the Department of Resident Life. So I wear a couple hats depending on the time of year. Right, I just took off my housing partnerships hat and I'm moving into off-campus housing services hat for this session. I run the off-campus housing services office, and we provide a lot of resources for students who are looking to live off campus. There are a lot of options when you're looking for housing off campus. Apartments, we have a lot of them, over 15. We have a brand new one, actually two brand new ones that are going to come online this fall. And these are all private properties. There's also a number of private houses in and around College Park that students can select, as well as our public-private partnerships that are managed by Capstone on-campus management. Typically, students will start their search anytime between October and July. With the number of options we have, I have started to see more options being available even into July and August, in case your student gets a little bit of a later start on their search. Like I said, off-campus housing services provides resources to help students navigate their off-campus housing search. We have two websites that we use to do that, och.umd.edu and ochdatabase.umd.edu. I always encourage folks to visit och.umd.edu first. We have a number of resources that students can use to start to plan their housing search. We have a resources booklet that students can work through some worksheets just to help kind of jog their mind around what they want to look for with regards to housing. And then they can move over to the OCH database when they're ready to conduct their search. This is an example of just one of the checklists that's in our resources booklet to help students think about what they want to look for in off-campus housing. That once they're ready to do the search, the OCH database is really helpful in kind of clearing some of the choices out of the way that they're not interested in. Students can use a text search if they're interested in a particular building. The map search is really handy if you're visual like me and kind of like to see where the different properties are in relation to like where classes are or where your favorite places to go might be. There's also a roommate finder option that only folks with a university login can use. So that keeps it to the University of Maryland community for the roommate finder. It's free for students to use. And if for some reason a student has a lease and needs to transfer it to another student or sublease, students can list on the OCH database at no charge as long as they log in using their university login. And we have new updates on a daily basis. So if we always encourage folks to come back if they don't find what they're looking for the first time, to come back again and see if there's something new. And this includes everything from a room in a house to a luxury condo apartment building. So it really runs the gamut of what students are typically looking for. Something to note is that when you're leasing off campus, everything goes directly through the property. The university and my office don't handle any lease signing when it comes to off-campus housing. The majority of properties have 11 and a half-ish month leases. Usually it's a partial month in there so that when students move out, they can go through and do any necessary cleaning and repairs before new students move in. The other thing that's different about off-campus housing is that all of the rental payments or installment payments are paid directly to the property. And nothing, even with South Campus Commons in the courtyards, goes through the university. So I'll talk a little bit more about paying in a little bit. And then some properties charge for certain utilities, some don't. So that's important to check on when you're looking at different properties so you know what the total cost is going to be if there's any costs above and beyond the monthly installment. Since this may be the first time your Terp is signing a lease, I just have some quick reminders. We encourage students to only live where they can access a written agreement, whether it's digital or paper. It needs to be written down so that they can refer back to it and so that it will be legally binding. Another thing that's really important is to read the lease. Sometimes I know students have a lot going on and aren't able to read everything that comes in front of them, but I really encourage them to prioritize reading the lease so that they know what they're responsible for and what the landlord is responsible for. And if there's anything that's not clear, they need to ask questions either to the landlord or they can take the lease to the student legal aid office. There's an undergraduate student legal aid office and they are willing to review leases or offer any type of legal advice that a student might need who's living off campus. Finally, take some time to walk through the space. If you're able to do so before signing a lease, that's great. I know a lot of leasing is done online, so that's not always possible. So if your student signs a lease and then is ready to move in, just do a quick walkthrough to make sure that nothing's broken or damaged and note anything that is so that when they're done with their lease, they won't be charged for damage that they did not incur. To pay for off-campus lease or off-campus property, they will take many forms of payment. I think the biggest question I get around paying is around using financial aid. Since the properties can't charge through the university, once the university receives the disbursement for financial aid or from a 529 plan, the university will take the tuition and fees out, and then any money that's left over can be refunded via direct deposit to the student, and that's how you would pay for the off-campus housing through that refund. Sometimes, it takes a little bit for financial aid to get to be dispersed to the university, and a lot of properties will have their first month's payment due on August 1st. Just because of how the leases are set up. So it's always important to have at least the first 2 months installments available outside of the financial aid so that you have time for the financial aid to be dispersed and so you can pay your rent on time. So I mentioned briefly off-campus properties. There's a lot of them, so I can't really go into the details of any of them, and we don't really promote any singular off-campus property. South Campus Commons and the courtyards, however, are public-private partnerships, so they have a relationship with the university, and we work directly with them around eligibility and lease signing. So South Campus Commons and the courtyards are managed by Capstone on-campus management, and then they work with us around the eligibility side of things. Commons and courtyards came into existence as an opportunity for students to have a kind of buffer zone before when they're transitioning from residence halls to completely off-campus living. So we have similar resources in place at both of these properties as students would have it in the residence halls. There's RAs and that provide community programming. We also have resident life staff who work in the buildings at South Campus Commons, and then similar positions at the courtyards that are employed by Capstone on campus management. And they have an 11.5-month lease. So that's similar but different from other off-campus properties. Leasing is probably the most different side of things. Typically, when you find an off-campus property that you're interested in, you can walk into the leasing office or go on the website, fill out an application, and then they'll let you select your apartment. In South Campus Commons and the courtyards, we have a couple different processes that students use to sign leases in these properties. We just finished our apartment selection process, which is the major process where students fill vacancies for the following year. And now we're going to be moving into the lease transfer process. So when all the leases have been signed and all the vacancies have been filled, the only way to sign a lease in South Campus Commons or the courtyards is to take over the lease from a student who can no longer take the lease. Since lease signing happens so early in the year, in February, a lot can happen between February and July and August. Students will find out about transfer opportunities, study abroad opportunities, internships, all sorts of things that would keep them from being able to live in the apartment they selected. So the lease transfer process is the formal process by which one student transfers their lease to another student. We encourage those students to list their space on the OCH database so that students who are looking for housing have one location to go to. And then they're on the Resident Life website, we have information about the process, the forms that students need to fill out and things like that. So if your student is interested in South Campus Commons or the courtyards, we have virtual tours to learn more about the properties. And starting on April 4th, we will resume the lease transfer process. So when you talk to your Terp about where they want to live, we have some suggested questions you want to ask. What are their priorities? Are they wanting to be live with their best friends, maybe in their junior and senior year? Or do they want to be close to class? Do they want to be close to extracurricular activities, things like that? Thinking about how they'll pay rent, how they're going to be funded, whether it's financial aid or a job, whether or not they want roommates or housemates. That'll definitely affect the price. Typically, the fewer people you live with and the more bathrooms you have to, or the more sharing of the bathrooms that occurs, the less expensive a property is or an apartment is. The fewer people you're sharing it with, will drive up the cost, as well as proximity. Are they okay living a little bit farther from campus in order to save some money and then use the wonderful public transportation that we have available at no charge for students through our shuttle system? And also, what kind of support do they need? Some students are, really ready to live off campus and advocate for themselves and things like that. And some students might need a little bit more support. So thinking about these types of things with your Terp is really important before making a decision on where to live. Those are all my slides. I'm happy to go back to different ones that I maybe went through a little quickly. I like to just answer your questions because a lot of the housing search is so individualized. There's lots of housing off campus, so it's not hard to find. What's most important is finding the right housing for you. And that's what we're here to help you with in the off-campus housing services office.
Thank you, Jenny. There were some questions that came through, and I just want to point folks to those answers as well. There was a question about transportation around campus, and so definitely the partnerships that we have with the courtyards and commons, they have shuttle service, but there's also either university shuttle or metro buses throughout the area that students can utilize as well. So I encourage you to look at the transportation website for the Department of Transportation Services, and they're at transportation.umd.edu. And they can give you more information about Shuttle the schedules, and then also the various properties where your student's considering. Will also have information on transportation for students, because that's how a lot of students make their way to campus.
Great, thank you so much.
There's some questions about payment. This one is about the amount that the university allocates to housing for banks. Is there a specific amount?
That's a question for financial aid. I have no idea. There is on the, though I can't always walk and chew gum, but there is an estimate. Let's see. On the financial aid website, there is
Like the cost of
the
attendance?
cost of attendance. Yeah, there is a cost of attendance, but it has estimates for on and off campus. I think that's what they use to kind of help make the decisions, but that's a question that I would defer to the financial aid office, because it also might depend on your own situation.
Oh yes, I see that now. I'll put a link in response to that question, just so you can see that.
There's a question about a student who's planning to study abroad in the fall, and how to find housing after they come back in the spring. I have a couple answers to that. There's a high likelihood that there will just be vacancies in off-campus properties. For the spring, we are seeing so many opening that I know some of them aren't filling completely. So there's a high likelihood that in going into spring 2025, there will just be vacancies in properties. Also, there are many students who attend on campus in the fall and study abroad in the spring. So if they've signed a lease in the fall, that would be a great student to help out and take over their lease in the spring. And that's true for off-campus properties as well as off-campus commons in the courtyards. So to find those students, you would go to use the OCH database, and you can click on, there's a filter for sublets. So that would be a place where you could find opportunities for housing. And there is sometimes on-campus availability in the spring. I know this fall they're planning to be quite full, but in the spring, students graduate, study abroad, lots of reasons students leave campus in the spring semester. So sometimes there are opportunities for on-campus housing in the spring. It's a question about fall only housing. I don't know of any properties that offer fall only housing. At least I haven't seen any advertising for that. On the database, you can filter for fall only. Typically, it might be a private like a private landlord, like in a house or in a smaller property that might offer that. And typically, they would have you pay a premium for that. So it might be, $100 or $200 extra for a short-term lease. But typically when students sign the lease, it is for the full 11 and a half, 11 and a quarter months. And then if they graduate in December, they would want to find another student to take over their lease. There's a question for clarifying about students starting their search around October. Most of the off-campus properties will start advertising for the following fall, so fall 24. So they were in fall 23, they were advertising for fall 2024. There is no reason to look that early because there's plenty of vacancies. Sometimes they will offer discounts for students who sign leases early, but I never want anybody to feel pressured to make a decision because of advertising that they're seeing off campus as early as October. A lot of students, particularly if you've transferred in for the first time, don't know which way is up in October. So I encourage you to take your time and make sure that your student is prepared to sign a lease when they're ready and not when they're feeling pressured. But yes, they'll advertise and as early as October, and the application for Commons and Courtyards apartment selection opens in November. However, selection isn't until February. I'd say the majority of students probably aren't really thinking about their off-campus housing until about now. This is when room selection is happening in the residence halls, apartment selection just happened. So if people aren't finding what they need from those processes and their current on-campus students, that's usually when they'll start looking off campus. And then for transfer students, as soon as they are admitted, they can start looking for off-campus housing. Food preparation classes. I think that the answer that Deborah gave is looking online. I haven't heard of much. I don't know, Danielle, have you heard of any departments that are offering any like kind of cooking tutorials? I love the idea, and it's something that if I was not so creative with my cooking, I think it would be fun to offer that option for students. Yeah, I don't know if dining services does do some demonstrations at the farmers market. But I don't know if they do any formal for students, but I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I don't think they do anything specific for like a larger group of students. I know there's some students who may utilize the campus pantry often, and we just got a new campus pantry and there is a learning kitchen there. But generally, those sessions that they do there are usually shared with the students who are utilizing the campus pantry or who may be part of the Fostering Terp Success program who don't have that network of support that would generally teach them how to cook meals. So if that's something your student is interested in, definitely reach out to the campus pantry and see what their schedule may be, because it could be that students are able to join those sessions whenever they have them. But I do know that with the new renovations to the campus pantry, they did add that kitchen in there, which has been great. And there's also a question about a meal plan for on campus. So since we're on the topic of food, so students who live off campus, they, depending on the property that they're at, they are not required to have a meal plan, but they can have a meal plan. Dining Services offers commuter meal plans, and so those are cheaper than a resident dining plan because they're not going to be on campus maybe as much, but it's a little more flexible. And even if your student chooses to cook more at their home than being on campus, it's still a good way to just kind of like supplement what they're doing at home, because if they're going to be spending a lot of time on campus, there's definitely perks to having a meal plan, either using Terrapin Express because it's tax-free meal dollars. So definitely something to consider, and that's through Dining Services. So dining.umd.edu, and you would look at the commuter student services.
Yeah, I actually just put a link. So if you go to the answered questions, to that question, I added the link to the student dining plans, and that lists both resident and connector plans. And I recommend it. I have I bought some dining punches, and it's definitely a nice treat when I don't want to spend any money right now because it's already been spent. And I mean, we've got some really nice dining halls.
Mm-hmm. And we're getting Panera soon, finally, which is super exciting. I saw that announcement come out, so yeah, really excited about that.
There's a question about Greek housing. You might want to get your boss for that, Danielle. He knows more about that than we do, probably. So the housing through the Greek system, I mean, typically you have to be a member of the chapter. However, I know sometimes, particularly in fraternities, they have vacancies they rent. Off the top of my head, I don't know which houses specifically are owned by the university. Danielle, are you able to find the link to the Greek life? I can't talk and type at the same time. We
Yes,
can put
I
that in there
can.
for more information for Jennifer.
Yes. So there are certain properties or certain chapters that have uh houses on campus and some that don't. And so it really just depends on the specific organization. For Jennifer, I just put the link for Fraternity and Sorority Life in the chat. But some chapters require their members to live on campus, some don't. Some there's a lottery system. So it really just depends on the chapter. If your student is interested in living in their chapter house, I encourage them to reach out to either their president or VP to see what that looks like, because they would be the best ones to be able to answer that.
There's a question about 529 plans around, oh, it went away.
Oh, sorry.
I always encourage folks to reach out directly to their 529 plan for specific questions around how they want to disperse funds, how much funds they can disperse, things like that. From my conversations with folks in the financial aid office, they actually suggest the same thing, just because some plans are managed differently. I've heard of everything, variations from, just everything comes to the university and then you get the refund and pay for anything that's not tuition and fees. So food, housing, transportation, things like that. I've also heard that of plans that are willing to make third-party payments. So they will pay directly to the property. So you just want to reach out to your plan administrators to see what that would look like for them. There's a question about paying the leasing office. Yes. So for South Campus Commons and the courtyards and all other off-campus properties, you would pay directly to the property. Only residence hall payments come through the university.
And to piggyback off that, are students paying for their room only, or is it all of the people in the apartment are responsible for all of the rooms in that apartment?
That's a great question. Thanks for bringing that up. By and large, they are just paying for themselves. So we call that a individual lease or a by the bed lease. So all of this purpose-built student properties, Terp Row, Union and Knox, kind of every tall building you see around campus that's not a campus building, they have a by the bed lease. So you're only paying so the student is only paying for their bed, basically. So one lease, one payment. And that way, if a student's roommate disappears, decides to go on a vision quest or something, and starts paying their rent, it won't affect your student. We do have some properties that have collective leases. That's a more traditional lease that you would think of. Alloy, the Domain, and Astor are all close to campus and have a regular apartment lease, collective lease. So in that case, if your student is there, it would be, and living with more than one student, they would put their money together to make that payment. So if somebody leaves, anyone remaining would have to make up the difference.
The next question is about average monthly rent. So it really is up to the property. And I've seen it range based on if a student has a 1-bedroom apartment, if they have a 4-bedroom apartment. So it really just varies. And then there's always the cost for parking and things like that. So you really would want to look at the specific property that you or your student are interested in to see what the cost is for that.
Yeah, and just to add to that, the estimate that I come up with is about $1,200 a month for a 4-bedroom, 2-bath. And it can be higher, like somebody had posted $1,450, and it can be lower. I know so it's around 1,200, I think is the average, but also like Danielle said, some properties you have to pay for water or electric, definitely parking. The only property that includes parking at the property that I know of is the courtyards. It doesn't include campus parking though, but you're always going to pay for parking in all the other properties. So that's, if there's a car, that's an additional payment. So always make sure that you are clear with the total amount, not just the base rent price.
There are a couple of questions about like apartment selection and applying for housing and things like that. Can you, I guess, give a brief overview of what that is and when those things were happening or are
Yep.
happening?
Yeah, so apartment selection is the main process by which current students select, spring register students select in South Campus Commons in the courtyards. And it's only for those. So the application went live for that in November, and the deadline was February 8th. And then we had the selection times appointments on February 21st and 22nd. The next process that's coming is room selection. So that's the on-campus housing process, the residence hall process. The deadline to apply for on-campus housing was Monday, the 26th at 4 p.m. And I know the folks in the Resident Life Assignments office have reached out to students who are going to be eligible for that process. And selection for room selection starts on Monday the 4th. So I know that students who are rising juniors and rising seniors in the residence halls are on a waiting list. So the assignments office will communicate with them if their status changes. And then with commons and courtyards, since that process is completed, I can go back. That's where the lease transfer process comes into play.
For the off-campus housing apartment buildings, this family member, they mentioned that there's students living from other schools, Bowie State or Howard University. Is that the case for all off-campus housing apartment buildings?
I don't know specifically. I know that, yeah, I know there are specific apartment complexes that have arrangements with other colleges, or it's just convenient. I know V Towers houses a lot of students from Howard University because of proximity to the Green Line, and I'm sure affordability because DC is not cheap to live in. But there's no, none of them are completely closed off to just University of Maryland students. But I've only heard of the 9 and Mazza Grandmark having more specific agreements with Bowie State and Howard University.
Can you talk about any either UMD police or College Park police and their presence at the off-campus housing properties? This one lists specifically the courtyards, but it would be helpful for any of the other properties in the area.
Yeah, so University of Maryland Police Department and the Prince George's County Police Department kind of have a concurrent jurisdiction. The University of Maryland police are better trained to work with students typically. So they work together if there's a call to an off-campus property. And then the University of Maryland police also work really closely with the city of College Park, so that folks like me and other people on campus are aware of different issues that might be occurring in properties. And then that way we can reach out to property managers to talk about what's going on, make sure that they have the resources they need so that they can support their students. They do have courtyard specifically, they do have blue light phones. I believe that UMPD does do rounds, or PGPD does do rounds at the property. I'm not sure specifically. The University of Maryland Police Department is also very happy to answer questions. Their website is, I think it's just umpd.umd.edu.
Yep.
And they have a lot of resources around for crime statistics around College Park in the general area, as well as their outreach efforts.
Absolutely. For off-campus housing, is insurance required?
I know at South Campus Commons in the courtyards, they require, in their lease, they require homeowner or renters insurance. One of our guests, thank you, answered the question around if you have homeowners insurance, sometimes you can tack on renters insurance. I would just double check, because I've heard both. If it's an apartment, they won't do it, but if it's a residence hall space, they will. But yeah, I encourage your students to have renters insurance, because just in the time that I've worked in resident life, I don't think there's been a year where a sprinkler hasn't been accidentally activated. And that can cause a lot of damage, not just to the unit where it occurs, but units below as well. So it's usually a pretty affordable add-on to insurance, and definitely saves a lot in the end if something does happen.
Uh, are there on-campus apartments available for transfer students coming in as juniors?
I'm gonna say probably not. There are on-campus apartments. However, I know they're expecting a large freshman class coming in. So current rising juniors and seniors are not going to be able to select during apartment selection. You can definitely apply as a transfer student and get on a waiting list. And then as far as the wait list goes, sometimes spaces open up as we get closer to the fall, and even after the start of classes. Sometimes students, they don't come, they don't show up. So those spaces are then released to students on the wait list. So I would say it really depends on how long you want to wait to find out. I know transfer students do go on the wait list when they apply. And then it's just really what's your tolerance for ambiguity is the question I typically ask parents when I talk to them. You will definitely be able to find housing off campus. I'm confident in that because there's so many beds available. Then it just comes down to, is it the right bed for you? If you're able to commute for a little while and wait and see if something opens on campus, you can definitely do that. Even into the semester, there will be spaces to be had off campus if on campus doesn't work out.
Is there a comprehensive list of apartments around campus, or even a table that compares the prices for those different options?
No, not that I know of. Our office doesn't have one. It's just the prices at properties can vary depending on the time of year. Yeah, so we don't have that list, but the OCH database is going to be your best bet as far as like you can on the OCH database, you can put in your rent range that you're looking for, and it'll give you a list of properties that are within that range. So that's probably the best resource we have for comparing property to property.
That's the resource that we mostly share with families, as well as the database. So highly encourage you to utilize that. Is it easy to find off-campus housing that has summer break or start late August to mid-May to match the academic calendar?
I don't know of any off-campus property that have an August to May lease. So there's always going to be the summer months included. And typically if students aren't going to be here in the summer, they might try and find a student to take over their lease in the summertime. I don't know how successful folks are, because there's usually less people here and less people looking for housing in the summer. So that's something to consider. And if a student knows that they're gonna want to be gone during the summer, if they start talking to students early on, they might be able to find somebody to take over their lease for that time. But there's no guarantees on that.
Yo.
There's a question about the lease transfer process. So the lease transfer process for South Campus Commons in the courtyards is much looser than apartment selection. Eligibility for lease transfer, I had it on here. Nope. What did I put that on? is basically you have to be a University of Maryland College Park student who's in good standing judicially and academically. If you're not in good standing academically, you're probably not registered. So it's much looser. There's no priority system when it comes to lease transfers. Just the eligibility side.
And then the last question we have here is for international students, can parents pay the housing to the university and the students use reimbursement to pay for their apartments?
I think that's a great question for financial aid. My simplistic answer is if you overpay, they will reimburse. You'll be able to have that money reimbursed back. But yeah, I don't know how that works with financial aid. Like it basically, it sounds like it's kind of like an overpaying. And you would just have the money in your student would just have the money in their account. And then they can be refunded. They can set up an automatic or direct deposit to refund any money that's in their account after tuition and fees are paid. Does that sound right, Danielle?
Yeah, that's my understanding of how it would work. That's my best bet on how this process works. But definitely connect with financial aid to double check that there's no unique rules or processes that we don't know about. Great. Well, we got through all those questions, which is nice. Oh, one more question came in. Has moved off campus. Is it easy to move back on? No, once a student moves off campus, it's not easy to move back on just because they would have lowest priority trying to get on campus. So it's not likely that once a student moves off that they are going to get a space on campus.
Yeah, their best chance to do that would be in the spring, but they might not be able to renew the next year or to return to campus the next year.
Yeah. Great. So thank you all for taking time to join us this afternoon. Contact information is on one of the last slides here. Yes, there you go. So if you need to get in touch with Jenny or her team, Off-Campus Housing Services, you can reach them on their website there, och.umd.edu or och@umd.edu, and they'll be happy to assist. As I bring this webinar to a close, I do want to remind everyone that a recording of this webinar will be available on the Terp Family YouTube channel this afternoon. Please be sure to review this with your student. And also you'll receive an email with a link to our YouTube as well as a survey. So let us know how we did, how we can improve, and also any other topics you'd be interested in learning about. I welcome your feedback and your thoughts on that. So again, thanks everyone for joining us and have a great, wonderful rest of your day. Thanks everyone.